mic check, please.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Chris Jennings.
I'm your host, Dr. Mike Brazier.
My name is John Gordon. I'll be your host.
And I'm your host, Katie Burke.
Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America. The DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, John Gordon. Got a special guest today. He's a guy that I've gotten to know recently. We filmed DU Nation with him down there on the Texas coast out of Matagorda and Port O'Connor. It's an episode that'll be coming up soon. He's one of the most fanatical fishermen I think I've ever been around, and that's hard for me to say because I've been chasing fish my whole life pretty much. But he's a young guy down there and a very interesting character. Zack Shannon, welcome to the DU podcast.
Thanks for having me, John.
Man, I just started thinking about this the other day. I was talking about fanatical fishermen. We went fishing on Saturday evening until dark after you had been fishing that morning. Just got in the night before from Cincinnati. Had already taken a party out. You had to be up at 3 o'clock the next morning to go offshore. So it was like, man, this guy really loves to catch a fish.
Well, it's hard to catch him sitting on the couch, and then we've had some wicked weather this year. And, when the windows are there to get out there on the water, it's I'm on it. We were out there this morning. I got to work this evening. I'll be out tomorrow morning. Got to work tomorrow evening. It's just the weather's been so rough this year that, we haven't had a whole lot of time where it's looking out and we got great weather. We got great conditions. We got a great moon, great tide, or, if it looks like it's worth fishing at all, we've been going this year pretty hard.
Well, it is a cool place to fish. That's all I know. I mean, it's very diverse from just the bay flat stuff to the surf to offshore. I mean, the Texas coast has got pretty much everything you'd want in a fishery as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, my trip Saturday morning, we were catching redfish. Then me and you went out Saturday evening catching trout. Sunday morning, I was offshore catching snapper. We had a bunch of mahi up in the boat. I think we caught about 6 or 7. We had a 70, 80-pound wahoo free swimming next to the boat. Couldn't get them to eat anything, but, and then this morning I was out running for tarpon in the surf. So, it's a little more work than a lot of other places to get that much variety, but it's here. You just got to want to get after it.
I got you, man. I got you. Okay, I want to go back in time to young Zack Shannon growing up in Cincinnati, Ohio. How'd you get started hunting and fishing at that point?
My dad loved to hunt and fish. My dad was a big outside guy. We grew up catfishing in the rivers, and we had these big pay lakes back home. It's inch fee to come in and fish for 12 hours, and you could sit around, and there's different ways to fish it. Catfishing, and you can throw it out and let it sit on the bottom. That was never really me. We would do bump trolling all day on the lakes. We'd find structure. We'd go out with just big egg weights and drag the bottom, looking for snags and looking for rock piles or looking for holes. And, we'd memorize where those holes were, and we'd go out and, we'd bump troll big live baits over those, over whatever structure difference in the bottom that we found, catching big catfish. And I loved to bass fish. Grew up watching fishing on TV shows, and the first time I got a hold of the saltwater, I was like, man, there's a reason they film fishing shows in the saltwater and not in the freshwater lakes in Ohio. But I grew up. My dad loved to deer hunt. I don't like hunting when it's -5 degrees outside and there's a foot of snow in my lap. That wasn't really for me, And then the deer hunting side, there's no moving. We don't hunt out of big box blinds back home. We don't hunt over feeders. And it kind of burned me out a little bit on the deer hunting. And, I did a little bit of bird hunting back home growing up. We'd float the rivers, shooting geese out of the river, come around a bend, and there'd be a pocket of geese sitting in the flats, and they'd bump up, and, we'd shoot a lot of Canadians like that, and shot a few ducks. Then you move down here and you get a taste of what it's like down here. And, it really rekindles that fire for getting after it again, because it's just so much better and so much so much more diversity than I ever grew up with.
Right. Yeah, that Texas coast area, man, as far as especially waterfowl hunting, you never know what you might be able to see down there.
Yeah.
It's really, it never surprises me that what ends up in the bag. But folks listening to this podcast, I'm preface this, what I'm going to talk about with Zack next is that Zack's a former star collegiate baseball player, professional baseball player. When did you know that baseball was going to be a huge part of your life? How old were you?
If you talk to my parents, they'll tell you that I said I was going to be a professional baseball player when I was about 6 years old. That's at least what I said, apparently. First time I remember, realizing that I was a little different and, had some really good abilities. When I was about 12, 13 years old, I kind of realized that I wasn't really playing with my friends anymore because it wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy it. I had to start traveling and getting away from it. And, luckily the baseball world in Cincinnati is very, very good in itself, so I didn't have to go too far. But yeah, I was probably 12 or 13 years old. And then, just kind of started playing up and started traveling a lot more and just never slowed down. It's what I wanted to do, just like now. I know I want to hunt and fish every day. Back then it was, I wanted to play baseball every day.
That's right. And the first time I ever heard your name, the name Zack Shannon, was out of the mouth of a mutual friend of ours, Uncle Jay Birchfield.
Old Uncle Jay.
Uncle Jay, who's a fanatical Delta State baseball fan. Folks, Zack played at Delta State in Cleveland, Mississippi. How did you get down to Delta State from Cincinnati?
Well, I went 2 years of junior college. I wasn't really the best student and didn't actually have the grades to end up going to a D1 college out of JUCO. Thought I was going to get drafted, never went. Was a stupid 19-year-old athlete. And a very persistent coach by the name of Coach Stephen Wagner at Delta State just would not leave me alone. The dude literally called me 6 times a day for 6 months. And they ended up getting me down there on a visit, and I just was like, man, got to get down south and start playing again, get in front of these scouts. And I can't, pass up an opportunity, and ended up coming down and, kind of really fell in love with the small town life. I am from Cincinnati, but, grew up originally in a smaller town off the east side of Cincinnati, moved a little bit more in towards the city later on into high school. But when I came down to Mississippi, I just kind of fell in love with that small town, good baseball program. Just everybody, the biggest concern is baseball. And that's kind of how I ended up falling in there.
It's interesting. Mississippi is a very small state. Obviously, Mississippi takes its college baseball extremely seriously. You look at 2021 national champion Mississippi State, 22 Ole Miss, Southern Mississippi is very much in the mix. And then, you played in the D2 World Series at Delta State.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I actually went on a visit to state my sophomore year at a Wabash as well. So I knew all about how serious collegiate baseball was in Mississippi. So
it had to be a big transition, though, at the Mississippi Delta. It's a very different place. And the people, we were talking about this the other day, man. There's no greater place with characters in the world than the Delta.
Yeah. Yeah. You can almost say it was a culture shock. First time, when I really moved down there, I'm Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm from the north, and I moved down there, and it's a whole nother lifestyle. It's everything moves a little slower, and people are more concerned about a little bit different things. And, I think that's really, really what made me absolutely fall in love with it so fast, moving down there and being down there.
I got you. I mean, once again, for the listeners, I'm gonna give a few stats because the state of Mississippi has produced a lot of power hitters. And some very famous ones, Will Clark and Rafael Palmeiro, just to name a couple. But they don't hold the single-season home run record of Mississippi. Zack Shannon does at 31. And in a season where you hit 406 with 93 RBIs, a Golden Spikes Award semifinalist, the first one in D2 baseball history. So the stage was set for you to be drafted and become a pro.
Yeah. The ball looked like a beach ball the whole year. You hear guys talk about, the ball just looks big right now, or the ball looks like a tic tac right now. And, I remember that whole season. I don't ever remember coming in from an at bat and feeling like I shouldn't have hit a home run or I shouldn't have whacked the crap out of it. And, it was a crazy feeling to feel that for a whole season. I'd felt that before, maybe not for 50 plus games. I'd felt it for a 10, 15 game stretch where you're just absolutely on fire, and then it kind of fades and then it comes back. But down there is the first year was kind of the same way. I can't remember exactly what it was my first year, but I felt I was hot the whole year. Never really cooled off, and then came back in the second year and just got even hotter and never cooled off. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, man. It was a lot of fun.
Well, and that leads to you're being drafted by the Diamondbacks, correct? It was a Diamondback organization. I know you were playing in Montana, and well, as often happens with athletes, man, you had some setbacks, and it spun your life in a different direction.
Yeah, I played good my first 2 years, and was just on pace to do what I needed to do, and COVID hit. I had a thumb issue my first year, a knee issue my second year, a knee issue during COVID, and then coming out of COVID, getting ready for spring training, I was invited to big league spring training, and 2 weeks before I report, I blew my Achilles out, and that one really hurt. Ended up getting released from that before spring training started. Had all the aspirations to re-sign and continue my baseball career and just push through the rehab and just fight the adversity. And I would say probably two and a half months into my rehab process, I pushed up off the table and my shoulder gave way. So I labrum rotator cuff AC joint, laying there with my foot in the cast, trying to recover from an Achilles surgery with a blown out shoulder. And that was pretty much the final straw for me. I was looking at a 2.5-3 year recovery after coming off an empty COVID season. That to me was just it was a hard pill to swallow, but just realizing, hey man, I'm going to be 24, 25 years old, not playing for 3 years. I'm not going to have a good chance of getting re-signed. So I stepped away from the game and had some good friends down here, pretty much tell me, hey man, quit being a sorry POS and get up off your butt and contribute to society and make something of your life and move down here. And I moved down here a little over right around 3.5 years ago, and just haven't looked back.
That Texas coastal area is unique to me because it's not like Florida or even like Orange Beach, Alabama area where the beach life is really a big deal. What's big down there is hunting and fishing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an entire culture built around it.
Yeah.
That people down there, man, are just hardcore, and you fit right into that mold.
Yeah. You can't find someone that doesn't do some sort of hunting or some sort of fishing down there. It may not be the ducks, it may not be the redfish, it may not be the trout, but they're doing some form of fishing or hunting. I would say probably 99% of the people down here, and like you said, it is a huge way of life down here, and it's crazy to see. You walk around and we were kind of talking about the other day, trying to find some new land, find some new duck lease land, and it's impossible. There's a waiting list to find lease land down here, and they're just crazy about it. And it kind of fuels your fire when you're just kind of getting into it and really figuring it out. And you go out in the morning and opening day of duck season, you get to the ramp and there's 45, 50 mud boats out there. Everybody's partying, getting ready for opening day, and it kind of fuels that fire and makes you really, really fall in love with it.
Yeah, that's right. And Texas is one of those states that is what? I think the stats are like 97 or 98% privately held. But
yeah,
you've got an entire world down there offshore in the bays that's totally public hunting. And the South Shoreline and East and West Matagorda Bay, they're technically privately owned. But for years and years and years and years, they've just let people hunt them. It's all tidal. It's all marshland. They run cattle on it, but on the outside edge, the cattle don't get it in any ways, and it's kind of turned into public hunting. And we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of refuge land down here that hold unbelievable amounts of birds. It's pretty cool. Being in this area on the coast, on the water, and like you said, it's very privately owned, the state of Texas. But being able to jump in the boat and go find a point on the shoreline that has been having ducks fly by, or go find a pocket, go find a little back pond, and that's a great thing to have, is all that tidal water that gives you access to hunt all that. Right. And you go up and down the coast. You're right there in the Matagorda area, the East and West Matagorda Bays. You go farther south, Aransas Bay area, Rockport, Port Aransas, and all that. I mean, you've got a lot of folks hunting down there as well. it's the redhead gets a lot of play down there, and rightfully so. There's huge rafts of redheads that winter on the Texas coast, but you're liable to run into anything down there, in my experience. And a lot of puddle ducks, especially teal, widgeon, pintail, they love that Texas coastal area.
Yeah. I mean, I found that later in the season, there's when we really start seeing our puddle ducks on the South Shoreline. Early in the season, we tend to try to hunt north if we can. But, that second split from end of December through the end of the season, I don't even shoot redheads. We see thousands of them. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing like, first light. You got a group of 2,000 redheads buzzing you, and, you get real antsy trying to pull the trigger on them. And, we're patient, and, we wait for those midday pintail flights. I don't know what it is down here. Those pintail like to fly at 10:30, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock sometimes. And, they get up high with that sun and stare down at you. And, it makes it tough. But, we get groups of 200-300 pintail coming through, and, it's great. I mean, it's awesome. It's a little bit more work being down there, but, it's awesome. You get the diversity is out of this world. We've been talking about that. You could go out with a group of 5 guys and shoot 12 different species of ducks. There's not a whole lot of other places in the world that you can do that.
Exactly right. And then, of course, in the wintertime, too, the fishing doesn't end. You can still catch fish.
Wow.
The whole cast and blast is a big deal.
Yeah, that's one of the best. You get out, you get early duck hunt in. They work well. They do what they're supposed to do. You get finished, hour and a half in, and you get back to the boat, pick up the decoys, grab a little sandwich, and, we'll go bump over to a little flat and go throw topwater or corkies for big trout.
Exactly. So it never ends. Because you think about the weather down there, it's very rare. It happens, but it's very rare that it's ever really that cold. I mean, a lot of times you're dealing with really, really nice temperatures in the 40s maybe to start out, but it's in the 50s, 60s pretty quickly. So you don't have to freeze to death either to get on some great action.
Yeah, we had some cold days last year. We usually get a little stretch of about 2 weeks that it's pretty ridiculous. We were breaking ice last year on one of our little ponds, and dogs had icicles hanging from them. We have days like that, but yeah, most of the time, it's very mild weather for the duck hunting world. Don't get me wrong, and I think that's why I really, really enjoy it a whole lot more. There's not a whole lot of times that we're getting up at and it's 5 degrees outside. It's very mild weather. I don't even hunt with a jacket until usually the split. The neoprene waders get worn probably 2 or 3 times a season, so it's very nice.
Up here in this part of the world, even Arkansas, Missouri, West Tennessee, if it's not cold, you're not going to have much success. Where I live it down there, it could be like 60 degrees, and you've got birds flying everywhere.
Yeah, it's great. This is where they come, and they go a little further south. This is a stopping point. So, as long as it gets nice and cold up there, it can be as hot as it wants down here. We still have those birds.
Right. And as an organization, Ducks Unlimited has spent a lot of time down there with Texas Parks and Wildlife and the Texas Prairie Wetlands Project, working with private landowners, developing habitat. I just had Todd Steele from the Thunderbird Club on the podcast, and we did a film with him while we were down there. Actually, right after we filmed with you, we filmed with Todd about developing habitat on the Texas coast. So you've got a lot of folks who are really working hard to improve that area and really make sure that those birds have a great place to winter.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it. I'd love to, everybody down here that duck hunts and goose hunts and crane hunts, everybody'd love to see, the rice come back and, have a whole lot more rice. But, there is a whole lot of projects and stuff going on where people are trying to, rebuild a little bit of that habitat. And, I think the Parks and Wildlife do a great job, with our refuges, keeping them as big and as blocked off as they are. Gives those birds a safe spot to be, gives those birds a place to rest. And one thing people forget about, is 2,000 miles south of where people start shooting at them. So by the time those birds get down here, they've seen every goofball, between Canada and, North Texas shooting at them, and they get fairly educated, and having a place for those birds to rest up on those refuges and up in those places like we're talking about the Thunderbird Club, it's a great place for those birds to rest up and get a little dumber for us.
Exactly. That's one thing those guys do, and a lot of guys on the coast, they try to manage their pressure pretty well to where, like I said, those birds have seen it all by the time they get down there.
Seen it. Every trick in the book, they've seen it by the time they get here.
That's the challenge of being a southern hunter, and I've always thought that the southern hunters are better hunters. Yeah, I'm biased, of course. I've been doing it my whole life that way, but I've always felt that that's the case.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. It's different, and I'm really excited. We've been talking about trying to go up north this year, and I got a friend of mine that he's got some stuff up in Oklahoma doing big mallard hunts. Just totally different. Down here is you can be as rewarded as the work you want to put in. And you can do your lazy hunts and it works, and you can put your work in and it works. And especially hunting the salt like I do. I love hunting that marsh. I love hunting that open tidal water. Love hunting the bay. If you wanna, put the boots on and put a little bit of work in, man, it makes for some really epic hunts. It's something really cool. The diversity. I mean, you could be, we do some stomps sometimes that make us debate, on whether or not it's worth it.
Hold that thought. We're gonna take a little break, folks, and we're gonna come back and we're gonna discuss some of the real challenges of hunting that type of terrain and also how rewarding it can be. So coming up next on the DU Podcast.
Stay tuned to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, after these messages.
Welcome back, everybody, to the DU Podcast. We're talking with Captain Zack Shannon from the Matagorda Bay, Texas area. We were talking about, like you said, putting some boots on the ground and some of the difficulties you got to face on the coastal area and the public land hunting down there. What do you think the biggest challenge is in Texas coastal hunting?
Mud and, it's the winter low water. This is airboat country down here. Airboats are great, but airboats are loud, and I've seen it plenty, guys rolling in airboats, and next thing you know, it sounds like, you got a million ducks over your head at 4:00 in the morning, and, there goes all your birds for the rest of the day. They push them all out, and then it turns into we're going fishing for a little bit because it's going to be an evening hunt. Really the biggest challenge is we get super low waters, and it's having to stomp. We've got some places that we've got 20-yard walks that are amazing, but they get pressured. And then we've got some places that are 700, 800, 900, 1,000-yard stomps through knee-deep mud. Those places don't get any pressure, and the birds are there. But, you're talking about a 45-minute to an hour walk through the dang mud at 3:00 in the morning, and that's tough. That's tough. That makes for a long, long day. Man, it's pretty cool too. Like that. Those birds aren't pressured. Those birds are doing what they need to do. Those birds come in, they'll work you for a second, and typically if your spread's right and your hide's good, you don't have any issues. I can't tell you how many countless amount of times I've been bayside, hunting a more easier access spot, and everything's right, everything's good. The birds want to work, and the pintails sit there for 20 minutes and do freaking circles over your head like turkey vultures, and here comes a group of widgeon up underneath them, and they look down at you, and they just keep, it's all about pressure, and it's all about getting away from the pressure. I love the weekdays, getting away from everybody, and, having the whole bay to yourself makes a big difference. Raft size makes a big difference. Early season, we don't hunt with a bunch of decoys, but, come second half, we're taking every decoy that we got, 15 to 20 dozen, and hunting huge rafts, and we'll spread out, 50 yards apart and hold little pockets and hold little hooks for those birds to come land into. And, whether they pick and choose which one they want to come into, we've got most of our bases covered, but, it's different. It's a big learning curve, coming down here and doing it down here. And, I've had some great friends that grew up down here that have kind of, helped me through it, and, kind of like the fishing stuff, like, we don't miss it. I don't think I missed more than 5 or 6 days all last duck season. You spend that much time out there on them, and, you kind of figure their ways out a little bit, but really, really the biggest difficulty down here is the pressure and the low water. Just, it takes away so much of your access. We were standing on the shoreline the other day fishing. We were 400 or 500 yards off the shoreline and then knee deep water still, so come winter time, when we lose another foot and a half of water, you got to walk that to get to your duck holes.
That's it. It's pretty skinny.
It's the boat doesn't go in there. This year we're trying to get it set up. We're trying to get a little crew circled out together with a couple airboats, a couple mud boats either. We're going to taxi everybody out in the bay boat, and the mud boat or the airboat will be sitting there waiting on that skinnier stuff. And we're going to push our way in on that. And we're going to try doing it that way this year.
I got you. That's a great point. That wintertime water level is very low compared to the summer, where like you said, we were out waist deep water the other day, and you go back there in December, and that water is going to be what, 6 inches, maybe?
Yeah, maybe depending on certain spots. But yeah, I've seen it plenty. Guys stuck, and it's. I'm not going to say I haven't been. I'm not going to say I haven't hit a couple sandbars. It's wild. You get out there and the water's just so much lower, and the marks that you had in the summertime, they just mean absolutely nothing out there in the winter. You find that's how you find your new oyster reefs to fish in the summertime. You go out there and your water's about 2 feet lower than what it was in June and July when you're out there, and you see oyster reefs sticking up out of the water, and you're like, well, I didn't even have any idea that was there. So it's a great way to find your new fishing spots. But yeah, man, it's that low water makes it really tough.
It was a good point you brought up a second ago about decoy spreads down there, because it's almost like a reversal that it is up here. A lot of folks start up here with really big spreads, and they might start pulling decoys and using smaller stuff as the season goes on to try to give it a different look to the spread. Because I think that that's huge. It's critical to success, having a different look than everybody else. So you've got to go big down there the later it gets.
Yeah, those birds get rafted up, and they get in big groups, and it's. You could go out with we do it. Don't get me wrong, we do it, and we kill birds But come into the second split, man, it's hard to go out there with a dozen or 2 dozen decoys or three dozen or 5 dozen. I mean, you want to go out there with everything that you have, and even then it still might not be enough. And the big thing is our redhead numbers out in the bay. They get so high, and everything else sees them, and they want to go land with them. The widgeon, the pintail, the teal, the buffalo. I mean, everything wants to go land with them because they know they're safe. And it's really hard to compete with 5,000 redheads rafted up in the cove next to you. It's really hard to compete with.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the decoy numbers go through the roof towards the end of the year.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The redhead numbers have to be seen to be believed, I think, sometimes. People they've never seen rafts of redheads that big and numbering in the thousands and thousands in any place that they've been to before in the past. And you go out there and the birds get up, and it's just like, that's just like what it must have looked like back in the 1800s in a lot of places where the birds are blackening the sky.
Yeah, it's really cool. I had some kids last year. We run these big kids camps down here, and last year was the first time we ever took them on a bay hunt. And, of course, fantastic weather, 30-mile-an-hour north wind, just huffing and puffing its butt off. And, I told these kids, I'm like, hey, these birds are going to be flying with the wind today. They're going to be going fast. Lead them by a school bus. And, right when the first light popped up, we had a group of 700-800 redheads come flying over our head. And, of course, young kids, never seen that before. They didn't shoot a single bird. It's how it goes sometimes. And, but they all looked at me like, we've never seen that many birds fly at once in our life. And I'm like, well, it's how it is out here, and the weekends are tough, but the weekends are great. I like the weekends that I like to hunt are high sun, warmer weekends. And it's the bay boats. Everybody out there fishing keeps those birds up. You look out and you'll see a boat going fishing. And you're like, that means it's time for you to sit down and get ready, because they're going to drive through a raft of birds at some point. They're going to push them up. And, you look out and that bay is going to cross the water. And next thing you know, there's 5,000 to 10,000 birds up in the air. It's wild seeing those huge rafts of birds out there.
There's another aspect I want to talk about real quick down there. I know I'm a big dog guy. You're a big dog guy. You have to be careful in those bay systems a lot because of dogs' feet and the fact that those oyster shells can cut one to ribbons. So talk about how you really have to work around that.
Yeah. I went through my first year with my dog. She got cut up pretty good. Was down for probably 2 or 3 weeks, got stitched up, and it was a learning lesson. And yeah, I mean, it's tough. There's a lot of oysters everywhere. Those oysters, they hold a lot of bacteria and, it can kill your dog. It's about finding that right point. Maybe the ducks want to be here, but man, we can't. I mean, I can't take my dog there. So if we're going to hunt there, we're not having a dog and we're going to pick up the birds. Or we can try to hunt 500 yards this way and try to traffic the birds in, and we could, we can use the dogs and we can run the dogs here. But man, it's tough, being out there and being in situations that, we can't really bring the dogs. But yeah, it's tough. You got to be real careful with the oysters and the dogs, and sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes you don't even know they're there until you're picking up your decoys and you're like, oh man, there's a patch of oyster shells and my dog probably ran over 10 times today. And, it's constantly checking their feet. I mean, my goofball won't ever even let me know that she's hurt or something got her. She's as birdie as it gets. But, about every 2 or 3 retrieves, I'm picking her up and checking her feet out, just making sure that everything she's running through is not cutting her out too bad.
Very good point. Very good point. Sometimes you just can't run a dog in some of those spots where the birds are.
Yeah, I don't like those spots, but sometimes you got to hunt them.
Me either, man. Me either. I hate it. It's a good point, though. We don't ever think about it here, like in Arkansas or something. You don't worry about the dog's feet.
Yeah.
They're never going to run anything but mud. And so it's easier because you can always pretty much hunt your dog. But it's a good point on the Texas coast that you've really got to be careful with your animal. Let's talk a little bit. You were talking about youth camps. I know you're heavily involved with kids, both in a hunting and fishing setting, and also you're teaching kids how to hit a baseball.
Yeah, so we've got there's a great little group down here, Hookspit Junior Angler Association, and they put on about 5 or 6 kids camps a year. 20 to 30 something kids come in for a whole week. They come in like Sunday for lunch, and they stay through Thursday night. They take a guided boat out Monday through Thursday. They do skeet shooting. They've got a really awesome bass pond. They take kids bass fishing in. Monday through Wednesday is like just to have fun and go catch fish. And then Thursday they run a tournament. They pay out for biggest stringers and biggest redfish, biggest trout. It's really about getting the kids really involved in the outdoors, and it's a great little deal that they got going on. And then last year we did a hunting camp. We did a goose hunt with them. We did a crane hunt with them. We did a duck hunt with them. It was a whole lot of fun, man. It's a whole new experience, taking the kids out, and you've got 4 different kids on your boat every single day, teaching them how to hunt and fish, and it's a whole lot of fun. I really fallen in love with doing it. And then I've got my facility here in town. I think I've got 50 or 60 kids that I do all the baseball stuff with as well in the evenings.
So yeah, guys like you helping those kids really learn the experience and get involved in the outdoors. From a Ducks Unlimited standpoint, we've really always been about it, from the Green Wings to the varsity programs in high school to the university programs and to adults, really bringing those kids along. So that's a great thing you're doing there.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's great. I never really grew up inside, and the only time I was inside was the winter. But in the summertime and in the spring and in the fall, I was always outside, and could never stand sitting inside doing nothing, or sitting inside watching TV when I could be outside fishing, when I could be outside shooting, when I could be outside just doing something. And I really enjoy that they put these big camps on for these kids, and they can kind of really like, hey guys, there's like look at what we have right here. This is what you can do besides sitting at home and doing nothing. You just got to get off your butt and go do it.
Too many video games being played these days, stuff like that. You just got to get outside and enjoy it. And there's such a bounty down there on the Texas coast to enjoy that it's really, really great. Let's talk a minute about how long did it take you really to learn the ropes about what you were doing down there as a captain on the water? Because it's challenging. You talk about the shallow water in the bay, especially. You can get yourself in real trouble.
Yeah, you can get yourself in a bind real quick. Man, really, I was when I first came down here, I was super paranoid, all the time. And this is before I was guiding. This is when I just had moved down here and was kind of finding my ways and doing everything. And I spent a lot of time on the water. Spent every dollar I made on gas, filling the boat up, and I'd just go get in the boat and I'd go drive the boat around. And I wouldn't come in until I bumped into a couple things a couple times, or I was running out of gas, and that was I really spent a whole lot of time finding out an area, and I'd pick a 2 or 3 square mile radius, and I'd go out there and I'd just do circles over it all day long. And I'd find the shallow spots and I'd find the shell. And, you got Google Maps and GPS and everything. And, I'd live on that. I stare at it and I'm like, hey, there's a reef here. There's a flat here. I need to go look at it. I need to go figure out how to get through it. I need to figure out where to fish it. It took a long, long time. And, there's still certain parts of the bay, it's ever changing. The reefs are always moving. The flats are always changing. The guts are always changing their depths. And, it's still, you'll learn every day when you're out there on it.
Yeah, it's easy to just get out on a lake where the water's 8-10 feet deep and roll around. People don't realize, man, you're talking about knee-deep water. Even you're in the middle of a giant bay and it's, only a few feet deep.
Yeah, I've, a lot of my customers, I've kind of explained to them, like they keep asking me, about the bay. And like, man, I think that the deepest part of East Matagorda Bay is like 6 feet deep.
Right.
I've never seen 7 foot, and I've got waiting customers and we'll go out and we'll go wade fishing and I'll stop in the middle of the bay and they're looking at me and I'm like dropping the power pole down and it's 1.5 foot deep. 1.5 feet and we're 2.5 miles from the shoreline in either direction. And, they're like, oh, I would have never guessed that this was right here. And, and it falls off. Those reefs fall off into deep water. But yeah, man, it's a very, very shallow bay system that, you get out there half-heartedly and, you can get yourself in a bind pretty good.
Yeah, but that's why there's so many ducks there as well, right? Those ducks are hitting that shallow saltwater big time because it's only a few feet deep, and they've got all kind of grasses that they're feeding on.
Mm-hmm, grass. We got a ton of bait that all those divers like to feed on, and it doesn't get rough. That's the thing with the deeper water. It gets rough. Our shallower water, it does get rough. Don't get me wrong. We've had our rough days, but it stays a lot calmer, being that it's shallower. Whitecap's faster, but the waves never get nearly as big. And originally I thought that those birds don't want to be in whitecaps and having waves splashing over them. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen a raft of birds 300 yards off the shoreline just having rollers smashing over top of them. They don't seem to care too much. In your brain you're like, man, those birds don't want to be in that, and they're in it. And they're out there rummaging. They're out there on those flats eating. They're out there, they're just doing their thing. And, they like to loaf in the middle of the bay and it's safe. It's a shallower bay system that doesn't get tore up. It gets muddy, it gets nasty, but, there's never 3-4 foot waves breaking out in the middle of the bay. They're always little rollers and, 1 to 2 footers most of the time. And, and those are nasty days. And, those birds, they just don't seem to care about it. Don't seem to bother them too much.
Exactly. And birds are so adaptable. They can adapt to different conditions that would bother a lot of other birds. Ducks just don't seem to care about that, We talked about guns and gun selection down there, that you really shouldn't come down to the bay with your 28 gauge and expect to have a lot of success, that you need to come, armed. Yeah,
you're going to have a tough time. And I've had guys do it and they've shot birds and we're shooting far a lot of the times. A lot of our shots are further shots. A lot of our birds are typically more plumed out and they're bigger and they're heavier and they're denser. And by the time they get down here, they got more feather. Those birds are a little harder to kill. Those smaller rounds, they don't seem to put them down near the same that they do, the further north you get. It's I don't really hunt with anything less than the 12 gauge, and back half of the year, I really like to shoot 3.5s. Just give me that extra 20 yards. Give me that little bit different, a little bit bigger pattern. Let me get onto that bird just a little bit better. We're not really shooting birds up in our face the whole time. We're shooting big wads of birds that are, they don't want to land on the shoreline. They want to land 70 yards off the shoreline. Sometimes it's about pulling the decoys on top of the shoreline to get them land 50 yards, or sometimes it's about putting the decoys 100 yards off the shoreline to try to get them land on the inside of the decoys. It's a tough little game down here. It's these birds, they don't want anything really to do with being up and tight on the grass. So that's where you're sitting your butt at, and you just got to kind of play with it and figure out your range. But that bigger gauge definitely helps a lot.
I got a 10 gauge that I'm going to bring down there to the bay this year. I want to try that baby out down there. It's primarily my goose gun, but I really thought that's a great place for it.
We'll go sit. We got some spots where we'll do ducks. We got ducks, geese, and sandhills on the marsh on a couple spots. So that'd be a great place for it.
That's another interesting point. You talk about sandhill cranes. When I was growing up in Texas, that part of the world was off limits to hunting sandhills, and they changed those regulations several years ago. And it's all related to the whooping cranes. But I don't ever see. I saw 2 whooping cranes in Rockport area, and I don't think that there's very many whooping cranes anymore on the Texas coast.
No, we didn't see a single one last year. We saw one on a refuge when we were scouting. We'll drive through the refuges and we'll sit on the trucks and sit up on top of the trucks with binoculars, looking through the ponds and looking through everything, scouting, and that kind of tells us where we need to set up on the bay, depending on where those birds are going to leave the refuge. And we saw one last year, but I never saw one hunting, not one time last year.
So the sandhill hunting is really good. But like I said, it used to be below 35, you couldn't hunt sandhills. And they've changed that in the last few years. So it's a bonus, and encourage you to hunt sandhill cranes just for the fact that they're great to eat. I mean, people talk about that all the time, but you don't know what they're talking about until you do it.
Yeah, they're delicious. We killed so many the last couple of years that we kind of started venturing out with it. In the beginning, we just ate them like a steak on the grill, and just grilled them up like a steak. Last year we did. I bring some home, and I did beef stroganoff, but with sandhill crane one day, and we did chicken fried crane and gravy over mashed potatoes one day, and it's just cool. Anything that pretty much you do with a steak, you can pretty much do with a crane. I started kind of treating them like a cheaper cut of steak. Kind of the weird things you do with a cheaper cut of steak to your tacos and all this stuff, and pretty much what I started doing with the crane, and that really made it like I was like, man, these birds are. These birds are something else, man. They're pretty good.
That's the truth. They are great. They are great. Well, Zach, thanks so much for being with us on the DU podcast, man. It's been great.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Gordo. It's great having me.
And it's Captain Shannon's Charters. Am I correct?
Yes.
Is that that's your outfit down there? So if anybody looking for a great time on the Matagorda Bay area, and you fish some out of Port O'Connor as well. I know we filmed down there some.
Yep, yeah. So, I'll chase the bull reds and the triple tail down in Port O'Connor, and then I do a lot of my offshore stuff out of Port O'Connor. And do our snapper, and come the late fall, early winter, we'll be going way out looking for tuna and amberjacks and doing all that stuff. So do most of my offshore stuff out of Port O'Connor, and I kind of learned how to do my saltwater stuff in East Galveston Bay. So I kind of float around everywhere, but East Matagorda Bay has pretty much become my home.
That's right. It's a great place to be. All right, Zach, thanks again, man, for being with us on the DU podcast. And thanks, everybody, for listening and supporting wetlands and waterfowl conservation.
Thank you for listening to the DU podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit ducks.org/DU podcast. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.